Welcome to Mission to Inspire, where we share life experiences in our careers, personal lives, society, culture, religion, finance, family, and much more. Meet your host, Shola Ajibade, as she takes you on a ride to fuel your inspiration.
Hi everyone, my name is Shola and I'm your host today on Mission to Inspire. Our guest today, her name is Michelle Walker-Smith. Hi Michelle, welcome onto our
Hi,
show.
thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Michelle, she is the founder and director of Aqua Limited, and she is a property mentor. So if you want to contact her, our contact details will be in the description. So go into the description and you get all our contact details. So she's the founder and director of Aqua Limited and Michelle Property Mentor. So please contact her. Our contact details will be in the description. Thank you, everyone. Today we'll be talking about how Michelle started her business journey and how her family life impacted our business journey when she was starting. So over to you, Michelle. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So basically, after I did my degree, I fell into housing management and loved the position because it was sort of dealing face to face with clients, with tenants. And I just loved the interaction. I loved helping people, helping them with the housing situations, getting to know what makes them tick. So I progressed up the ladder and went into mid-management. I went into a position which again dealt with tenants, but it was more on the refurbishment side, but it was still classed as tenant liaison. So it's all my corporate life, if you like. It's been dealing with people and helping people and housing related. Which was how I sort of, when we started our journey, I sort of had the background to enable me to sort of deal with the situations that we were confronted with. I mean, when I met my husband, Peter, he again was in the development industry, worked for house builders, and he was sort of quite experienced in that side of things. And then when the credit crunch hit in 2008, he was made redundant. So he started up a consultancy business, but again, the contracts that he had came to a close, and it got to the point where he was just fed up of other people deciding when he was going to work and when he wasn't. So he'd been getting emails from a property training company and decided, once he'd been made redundant, coincidentally they were having a weekend of training, that he decided to go down. And I made him promise, because we had his redundancy money, so I knew we were safe for 3 months mortgage. And I said, please don't sign up to any of the courses, because I knew they were horrendously expensive. And I just thought, I can just see having no mortgage money and what we're going to do. And I was at the time, I was so risk averse. I was 8 months pregnant with Patrick, my third child as well at that point. He came back and he was like a man on speed. He'd had so many light bulb moments. He was going to buy a portfolio with other people's money. We were going to run the portfolio. We were going to be becoming financially free. All of the promises that people make, and you can imagine the 3 month mortgage money had gone. I was kind of, how we're going to pay the bills. I nearly divorced him, killed him, gave birth, you name it. The arguments we had about that was just horrendous. So nevertheless, I calmed down a little bit. We did have a couple of single buy-to-lets, because he's from the West Midlands, so I rented my house out when we decided to move in together. I got a job down there in Walsall in the West Midlands, and then didn't like it, so rented his house out, kept my house, and bought a third house. So we're kind of, I wish I'd known then what I know now, because so it was Pete's idea, to be fair, and he was like, well, we'll remortgage both our houses and we'll buy a third. And the mistake we made back then was we bought the third house for cash because we didn't want any bills. But of course, if I'd done it the way that I know now, we should have bought four and leveraged the monies and had the mortgage. But nevertheless, you don't know what you don't know. So but we were sort of accidental landlords, if you like, before we started increasing our portfolio. So sure enough, we decided on Ashington in Northumberland as our gold mined area. And because Peter had worked for the council up there and I'd been a housing officer up there, we knew the area pretty well, but we did a lot of research in that particular area. Very high yields, very much, there's very few owner occupiers. A lot of the properties are investment properties for tenants. It has got a bit of a reputation, certain parts of Ashington. So I was like, oh no, why are we investing there? But nevertheless, we went with it. And it was a case of, at the time, I'd had my work was just in administration, because I'd had a couple of my babies at that point, which is another story. And I wanted to have my hours to fit in around their schooling. So it was kind of, do I stay in my comfortable slippers or do I start managing the portfolio myself? Originally, I was like, I don't want to be involved in it. I want to enjoy Patrick. I knew he was going to be the last child. But then it's always been inbuilt in me. I just don't like empty houses. And our portfolio was stood there. Of course, we're paying council tax, house insurance. We'd had to refurb a few of them. Because we ended up buying 13 houses in 12 months. We made a joint venture with Pete's family, remortgaged the property, and they sort of allowed us to do that, to get our lump of money to start us off, sort of thing. So it was kind of like, right, I'm just going to try and put an advert out on Facebook. Got a great deal of interest. Because of my experience, I knew that you had to check people out and make sure they were good payers, etc., etc. And I realised that very early on that I enjoyed the sort of getting to know the tenants and what made them tick more, I think, than a sort of a larger estate agent would. So it became very much my sort of unique selling point, that we're more than just an agent. We're there at the beginning. We get to know the tenants. If they need help in filling forms in, we're there. We're there to hold their hands, not just to sort of put them in a house and think, there you go, crack on, best of luck. And I've found that the relationship that you have with the tenants is paramount, because if they trust you, they're more likely to pay the rent.
That's true.
So because Pete was on his 12-month training course, which was all property related as well, we had landlords coming to us and saying, oh, what you doing? And so we would have little open events, and they would come up from London or wherever they lived, and we would show them around our portfolio, what we'd achieved, the rents we got for them. They could see the relationships that I had with the tenants, and that it does work. And so we kind of grew organically, and then it's only been recently I've sort of started becoming a little bit more active on social media, and people keep saying, you need to shout about what you do, or we don't know about Aqua lettings, and because I'm not that sort of person. I do the do. I enjoy what I do, but it's time that the business, if you like, turns into a proper business, not just a hobby, which I think is what it's been. I've got a member of staff, and I'm currently employing my second member of staff at the moment. So we are scaling slowly, because I don't want to grow too quickly. But the idea is to grow it so that I can take more of a step back, work on the business, work on the mentoring side, because obviously we've over the years made tons of mistakes. So we're quite authorized to tell people to hopefully prevent them from making the same mistakes as us. So that's basically the property journey. But then, as you say, the the other side of things was at 35, I ended up, well, I started getting niggly pains in my lower abdomen on and off for months. And I didn't know if it was sort of period pains or, you know, hormones or you know, exactly what it was, whether it was from a bad back, you know, I just didn't know. But then the one morning, I basically was doubled over in pain, to the point that, because I've got quite a high pain threshold, and this one particular morning I thought I was going to die. I couldn't stand up. So Peter, I think was down in Peterborough. So my dad had to come up and literally take me to hospital. So they thought, they put it down to stomach flu. Well, I knew, you know, instinctively you know that something's wrong, don't you? And my mum's appendix was on the other side of her abdomen to where it normally is. And then on my dad's side, my grandfather had died from peritonitis because he had an undiagnosed. So I knew there was a history of appendicitis in the family on both sides. So I basically begged one of it wasn't the consultant, because he was like, oh no, it's stomach flu, you'll be fine. It was his registrar that I begged to have a look inside. I said, there's just something not right here. And sorry, that the night before I'd sort of begged him, I was violently poorly. And with hindsight, I think that was when my appendix exploded. So he did the keyhole surgery, had a look in, and apparently had to use about 5 litres of water to clear me out, because there was so much pus and God knows what else in amongst it all. And that apparently my bowels were like tissue paper because they were that damaged, or weakened. They weren't damaged as such, because I've had no, touch wood, no lasting effect from there, but they were very vulnerable because they were like tissue paper, so they could have been damaged quite easily. So I had to, they removed what they could see, which was left of my appendix. And then I had to go for another operation 6 months later because I was so inflamed inside. They didn't want to move everything about, so I had to get the remainder of my appendix removed 6 months later. And at the same time, because that over the years, Peter and I got married and we were wanting to start a family. And being, because I was mid-30s, I knew I was sort of knocking on a little bit, so I mentioned it. So they did a test, like I don't know what you call it, but when you put the sort of a luminous dye through your fallopian tubes, and because of the infection, there was no dye getting through my fallopian. Oh yes, yeah, that's right. And there was nothing getting through my tubes, which of course was devastating. But the consultant did say, through IVF, you will have a baby. You're perfectly healthy apart from your tubes. He kind of said that he thought that, it wouldn't be an issue having a child once it was put in the right place, as it were, So away we went, and we signed up to a private clinic in Darlington, the London's Women Clinic, because there was a bit of a waiting list through the Newcastle Centre for Life at the time. And again, because I didn't want to hang fire, I thought, right, let's just crack on with it. So luckily, the first round worked. And I mean, if it hadn't been happening to me, it's a fascinating procedure. I found it sort of amazing what the body does, having to give yourself hormonal injections in order to make your ovaries ready for them to take the eggs out. And I mean, at the time, I kind of went on a health kick because I wanted to give my body the best chance possible to conceive, because I didn't want to have that, oh, what if, on my mind, if I'd been overweight or unhealthy foods, whether it had been, because I'm the type of person I would have clung on to that and blamed myself for it not working. So luckily, it worked. I was hyperstimulated, so I ended up having a lot of fluid all over my body, and I think they got about 26 eggs from my ovaries, so that there was, which is quite dangerous in itself, because I think they put too many hormones in, so my body had overstimulated itself, as it were. But they put 2 embryos back, and one took, and then 9 months later Nathan was born.
Oh.
So it was just amazing, how. And then, because at the time I felt quite embarrassed that my body didn't work properly, and I was quite I was embarrassed, and I didn't tell many people that we were going, or that we needed this procedure, because I just thought, I felt really quite sort of down on myself that my body sort of, to know that it works after that. I just think it's amazing,
Yeah, that is so amazing. Wow. So was it that so when you had the tummy issue and you had to go to the hospital and you had to perform that surgery, the laparoscopy surgery on you, so was that what made you not be able to conceive?
Yeah, it was when my the appendicitis, and with the peritonitis, and all of the pus and the infection from the appendix had literally damaged, like blocked my fallopian tubes. So unbeknown to me, when we were trying for a baby, there was nothing getting through at all. And it wasn't until after we'd had the second part of the appendix removed, and then he did this test, and he found out that was what had happened, that the appendicitis, basically, the peritonitis and septicemia and God knows what else. I had a stomach infection and blood infection, and I hadn't realized it, but I was quite close to death at that point.
Oh my God.
But no, still here.
You're still here, yes. You're still here. Oh my God. When I was trying for a child as well, I think I was age 27. That was
right.
So I got pregnant, and the pregnancy, unknown to me, was in the tube, on the left tube.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Because that's quite dangerous as well, isn't it?
I was spotting for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
After I'd missed my period. So I went to my GP, and as soon as I told him, he said, "Oh, he's sure he knows what's happened." I asked him, I said, "What happened?" He said, "Don't worry, we just have to carry out some tests."
Yeah.
And Lord and behold, when they did the test, baby was in the tube, at 4 weeks old. And he said it was very dangerous because it keeps growing. He said not even cooled, it will burst.
Yeah.
So I had to go through the same surgical procedure you went through.
Wow. Yeah.
So they had to perform that keyhole surgery. They had to actually remove my left tube.
Wow. Oh yeah, because that, as you say, that can be, I have heard that being very dangerous, if it had gone undiagnosed. So wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So it's amazing what we go through.
It really is, isn't it? I just think that the human body, I mean, especially women who actually, carry the children, and obviously give birth to the children, and then the body, what the trauma that the body actually goes through and then recovers so I say easily, but I mean, when I had Nathan, I was cause he was due on the 15th of August, and I was induced because I had signs of preeclampsia as well, but I was only ever the 2 side. So I think there was protein in the urine, high blood pressure, and I think there was the if you see a few stars, and I can't remember whether there's any other symptoms, but I only ever had 2 at a time. So I was induced and then went into labour on the morning of the 14th of August, and it was very intense. That my labour pains were because when I'd read the books and I'd heard that they're soft and then they build up and then you have a rest and then you have them and then they get stronger and stronger. Well, mine were like boom, straight, straight into it. So I woke Pete up and he was like, oh, as again, you read the books, let's have a bath and try and ease them. And I phoned the hospital and they were coming. It seemed to be every minute, and she says, "Oh, I think you better come in. You sound as though you're in full labour already." So, but we drove in, and apparently I was 6 centimeters dilated at that point, and then that I think we went in. I think it was early hours, and she said, "Oh, you're going to have this baby by 6 o'clock in the morning." But then it turned out that he was stuck because he was such a big baby, such a long baby. And it turned out that he was back to back, so he couldn't slide down the birth canal. So they gave me drugs to stop the labour. They gave me drugs to sort of start the labour in a less violent fashion, because as I say, it was full on straight away. Then they gave me an epidural, and then they were just they were going to use a ventouse and this, that, and the other, and they prepared me for a section because they didn't know whether or not I might need a section. It turned out that I had to have an emergency section. And so Nathan wasn't breathing when he was born. And I'd got put to sleep at this point because I was just absolutely very emotional, very tired. So I said, "Oh, just knock me out." So Nathan wasn't breathing when he was born. So then they had apparently my womb wouldn't contract again. My womb had gone into shock. So the consultant had my womb in his hand, apparently. I mean, I was glad I was put to sleep, to be fair. I wouldn't have liked to have seen that. So he had to stitch me up and do it. It's a bowline stitch, I think it's called, where he literally had to stitch everything back together. And then when Nathan was put into the special care baby unit, I mean, he was £9.4 when he was born, so he was a good size. And he was put in the special care baby unit, and then he had his heart x-rayed because with him not breathing, just to make sure that it was working all right. And they saw sort of another, it was like his heart was double the size, and they thought that it was because he was starved of oxygen through birth. So he got blue lighted to the Freeman Hospital, which is a specialist heart hospital in Newcastle upon Tyne, because we were in the Wansbeck up in Northumberland. And of course, I was very poorly, but I thought there's no way, because I was breastfeeding as well. So I thought there's no way I can be away from my baby. So I discharged myself. So I was in a wheelchair. That was it. Sorry, the consultant had come into the room and said, "Your baby's got a tumour on his heart." Well, you can imagine, an IVF baby. I mean, they're all special, but I think when they're IVF, they're kind of, you go through so much. You just, a really wanted baby had ended up, I'd been told that there was a tumour on his heart. So I didn't know whether it was cancerous or whether, just what it was. It was just, I'll never forget the sort of, my world just, I felt physically just, my world just dropped. So he was taken off to the Freeman Hospital, and I discharged myself. And then again, through loads of tests, he was in hospital for the first week. So I couldn't even bring myself to open the good, the congratulations on your new baby, because I just didn't know. I thought, if he doesn't survive, what am I going to do? And I used to have to set my alarm through the middle of the night to express so that he could have my milk, because I was desperately wanting to breastfeed him. And I mean, I think he did end up having a little bit of bottle from the hospital staff, but luckily the consultant, Richard Kirk, I mean, I'll never forget him. He was so calming and experienced, and he said, I think he's got a cardiac fibroma, which is kind of an extra piece of flesh which is on the left hand side, and as Nathan's heart's grown, it's stretched. So if you looked at him now, you probably wouldn't realize that he had anything extra. But at the time, going through it, not knowing if it was going to affect him growing up or anything like that, but touch wood, he's fine. He's nearly 6 foot, and so he's just, but the worries that they put us through, isn't it, having babies?
And despite all that, you were still working. I'm very sure you were still working, and I'm sure you were thinking about starting a business and everything, and you still had to go through all that.
Well, that's it. And I think things like that, it kind of prepares you mentally, because I always think it's very much about mindset when when you're in working in your own business. I think that you have to have a strong, and I mean, I'm always working on mine. I'm by no means finished all of my work that I've had to work on myself, because from being a very risk averse person,
Mm.
quite a shy person, a person who doubts their own capabilities. I've always been sort of that sort of person. So I've had to kind of get over myself a little bit, in order to sort of, you know, have what it takes to sort of run a business. And sometimes I have to pinch myself to think that, God, Aqua Lettings has been going 7 years now, and we
Wow.
manage 120 houses, and 40 odd landlords rely on us, if you like. And
Mm.
I think you've got to have that strength of character in order to believe it's going to work,
Yes.
because
Yes.
nothing in life's guaranteed, I suppose.
Mm-mm.
And
No.
so I do think that for all it was a horrible experience, it has kind of made me a stronger person for it, if you know what I mean.
Yes. 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 And it does prepare us for what's ahead, when we go through
Exactly.
tough times sometimes.
Exactly. No, I think you're right, and I think that, again, when I went through it for the first time, I didn't talk to many people about it, because it was the unknown, I suppose, and none of my friends had ever gone through it, and they were all having babies, and I was happy for them, but thinking, oh, why is it not my turn, sort of thing. Um, and then when because we went through it again with Jessica, and had another fresh cycle, which thankfully worked, no problems. And then, because I was a bit more used to, and sort of not, I don't think you can ever get used to it, but a bit more aware of the procedure, etc. It
Yeah.
was kind of, I felt easier to sort of talk about it. And then, as I say, as I opened up about it, it was amazing the amount of women that I came across who it was necessary to have
Mhm.
children. And it's amazing how many people do or have actually gone through the IVF procedure.
Procedure.
And I think now, especially, it's a lot of, people don't mind talking about it, even personal experiences. But I just think it also, the more you talk about it, the more it helps, because then you realize you're not alone.
Exactly. That's very true. That's
Yeah.
very, very true. Very true. I went through the IVF procedure twice, but
Yeah.
it wasn't successful. And
Oh.
then I had my baby naturally.
Oh, isn't that amazing? Oh, wow. It's amazing how the body finds a way. He was meant to be. You see? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. I mean, it's sad that the IVF didn't work, but I have heard that once, the mind again, I think once it relaxes, and maybe kind of comes to terms with the fact that possibly we may not be sort of mums naturally, the body then, I think it does its thing, doesn't it?
Yes, it does this thing.
Yeah.
It does this thing. Yeah.
We had a frozen cycle from Nathan's batch, because there were so many eggs, and we just froze them because we didn't know, we didn't want to just dispose of them, which was the option. So we held them in storage. So after Jessica was born, I mean, I was sort of coming up, I was just past 40 at that point. And I'd said to Pete, come on, let's use these frozen cycles. What will be, will be. And I fell pregnant from a frozen cycle, but unfortunately miscarried.
Oh,
Um, around 8 or 9 weeks. And then I needed, the choice was, do you either just take a tablet or take something? So we decided that I was just over 40, and we decided that we were going to use the eggs that had been frozen from Nathan's cycle, which was 2008, and it fell pregnant, but then unfortunately miscarried. But it was a weird concept to think that I was carrying Nathan's twin, but 4 years apart, because it was from his fresh cycle, obviously, that would frozen them, and that was kind of, whoa, that's a bit strange, if you like. But unfortunately miscarried. So then I had the option of either taking something to sort of, and then coming away naturally, but I didn't really want to have to go through that, so I opted to be put to sleep and then have the procedure when it's taken away. Used to be called a D&C. I don't quite know what it's called these days. So then had that. We're looking to adopt, because I've always wanted a big family. I'm an only one, I've never had any siblings, and I've always just wanted, to have some, I always thought nobody's there to play with me, sort of thing. So I always wanted a big family. But, once the frozen cycle didn't, we miscarried, I thought, well, we'll look to adopt. So we went through a few of the classes to adopt, because that's quite a rigorous you have to go through lots and lots of different classes and courses and this, that, and the other. And then we thought, really, we've got a girl and a boy. We are really thankful that we've got healthy children. Let's just sort of leave it there. So we decided that was our family complete. Then sort of that was it, going on with life. And then at 43, I was late I think I'd got on a bit of a fitness. I'm always sort of trying to lose weight, and I yo-yo up and down with my weight, and I love my food and alcohol and things like that. So I was on a bit of a fitness time, and then I remember being late for my period, which I was always like clockwork. And I'd said to Pete, wouldn't it be funny if I was pregnant? And he was like, well, it would be, but he says, don't get your hopes up, because you just can't, So I was like, oh, I know. But then I'd been to 2 weddings consecutive weeks. Of course, I'd had a good drink as well. And then we were due to go to Spain. I think it was probably a fortnight hence, and I was still late, and I thought, this isn't like me, So I went to the shop, and I thought, right, I'm going to get a pregnancy test. And with Nathan and Jessica, I got the electronic ones, the clear blue. And I was like, oh, I've got to know how many weeks. And this one, I thought, oh, I'll just get Tesco's own, I'll not be pregnant, but I just want to rule it out. So then I got up through the night, had a wee, and then the line came up, and I was like, oh my God, how did that happen? Sort of thing, So I vividly remember going back through and waking Pete up and said, you're going to be a dad again? So he was like, what? So, but it kind of messed with my head, because I'd taken all this time to kind of accept. But initially it was kind of accepting that we needed the IVF, then accepting that we weren't going to have any more children. Then to then being pregnant and thinking, oh my God, how did that happen? And of course, I was worried about having the ectopic pregnancy as well, because, just because of the things you read. So I went to the doctors. Of course, I was that early on, they couldn't really tell how far on I was or anything. And then I think the week after, I went for an early scan, and then sure enough, there was a little embryo in the sac, sort of thing.
Oh.
And I said, well, what about my holiday next week? Do we cancel? And she's like, well, no, she said, awful low it sounds. What will be, will be. If it's meant to be, she says that the holiday will be a nice relaxing time for you, one way or another, sort of thing, And I spotted very heavily. And I remember thinking I'd miscarried on the plane on the way over, because there was a lot sort of coming away. So again, I just felt a little bit off color when I was on holiday. So I just literally relaxed, and what I realized now, it was probably morning sickness, but at the time I just thought that I was a little bit down and not sure what was going on. But I was off my food, and I didn't want any alcohol. So we ended up going to a hospital over there, of course, the Spanish hospitals are much different to the British hospitals. So they gave me a scan. And of course, Pete wasn't allowed to come in with me. Very old-fashioned sort of I don't know what the word is, matriarchal hospitals where the husband had to stay outside. So I had this scan, perfectly healthy heartbeat. And he wanted me to come back the following week. So I did that, and it had grown. So I knew, and I had a feeling that the baby was going to be healthy, he was going to be okay. So then Patrick was born, a little miracle at 43. So I mean, I've had 3 cesarean sections. So obviously the first one was an emergency, and then 2 because I didn't want to risk that anything was going to happen to the babies. So once I had the section with Patrick, I had my tubes tied because I thought, as much as I love children at 43, I don't want any more. That was it. So no.
Oh my God. What a very interesting but
Yeah,
fulfilling part, God, I believe that there's something called destiny, and
yeah,
we just all have to go through what's been written, how we were gonna
exactly. Isn't that right? I think I do genuinely agree with you that for some reason that I always had 3 children in my mind. And because my dad, when I told my dad that we were going to go on for after before Patrick, this is, but we were going to go on for like another IVF, because I did have another fresh round that didn't work, and he was like, "But when's it going to stop? You can't keep trying and trying and trying because of the financial side of things, and obviously getting older." And but I do think that it's all written out there for you, and I'm a firm believer in God doesn't put something in your way unless he knows that you can cope with it.
That's
And I'm
true.
not particularly religious, but I do believe in the higher, that there's something out there that keeps you right. I'm a firm believer in that.
Yeah. Very true. Wow. Wow. Thank you so much. Your story is so inspiring. Very
Oh
inspiring,
no,
especially
yeah,
for women, not just women, even family or men who are trying to start up, and they had to go through, few things that we all have to go
yeah,
through in our family or individual life. But then here you
exactly.
are.
Exactly, and it's totally around mindset. I think, as you say, whether it's men, women, whether it's having a family, starting a business, I think if you're in the right mindset, anything's possible. You've just got to believe that it's going to happen. And I do genuinely think that you've got to sort of become sort of your habits. You've got to sort of believe and tell yourself that it's going to be all right, and then 9 times out of it will, 9 times out of 10 it will. Whereas I think if you've got negative energy, and then you attract negative energy, if that makes sense.
That's
And
true.
I've found that very, very much the case, and I've got coaches and mentors of my own who who sort of keep me right. And I do think you have to invest in yourself. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's very true. Thank you so much. So
No problem.
today you are a successful businesswoman in your own right. So can you give us some tips on how to continue on our journey, on our path, amidst everything that we go through in life?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that life is for living. And I think, we all have our ups and downs, and things come up in our way where you think, oh, why is it happening to me? And it's human, we're all human at the end of the day. But I think you have to have personally, I always had to have a reason why. And that's my children. Whatever I'm doing is for legacy for them, to leave, whatever I can to give them a bit of a foothold on this awful world that we live in, to sort of give them a little bit of an extra hand, if you like, to get, and they can either come into the business, or they can sell it, or whatever they wanted to do. But I think you've got to have a reason why. And you've got to have self-belief that you're going to be able to do it, because I think the only way that you fail is when you give up. And I've thought about it, don't get me wrong, when we've had our financial strains, and I think when you have one property, you're kind of like you're reliant on whatever other income that you've got. If it's empty or if there's repairs to be done, you've got to put that right. Whereas if you have a handful of properties, you're very unlucky if more than a couple of properties are either empty or have repairs at the same time, but they kind of manage each other. So I think if you get a handful of properties to support themselves, and then if you wanted to start your own business, just have a vision. What is it that you want to achieve, and just go for it, and don't be frightened to ask for help. Reach out to people, because there's loads of free advice and help online, and on YouTube, and people are forever sort of sending emails with free advice. So just soak up the knowledge of what you can, and then something will just click and you'll get ready to move on to the next level, as it were. And then you'll start, whether it's your portfolio, whether it's a business, you'll get onto that level. And it's only when you start feeling comfortable that you're ready for the next level. And again, just start looking about, follow people who've done it, get tips from them, reach out to them, because I've reached out to some people way ahead of me on either the property journey or on the business journey, and they're more than happy to help. So reach out to people, but just never give up. Always have that belief. I mean, I think always have an exit strategy as well. My exit strategy would be to sell the business or sell the properties, or death, and leave it as a legacy. But I would have that exit strategy, so that that if one strategy excuse me, doesn't work, you can go to if you wanted to try serviced accommodation, because that's where the money tends to be, you could always turn it into a buy to let. If
True.
you found out that it didn't work, always have an exit strategy, or another strategy that you can try if the first one isn't working. And you're always going to have to tweak things, and some things aren't going to work. My
That's
husband
true.
did commercial conversion. He did a couple of jobs, and they didn't go very well, so that left us in a lot of debt. But then luckily it was property who, when we managed to remortgage, that got us out of that debt as well. So property's very forgiving, but it's not a short-term thing. You've got to be in it for the long term. But it's like the business side as well. It's not going to happen overnight. Now that I've been running 7 years, I've got landlords who come to me, and I've got investors who come to me because they want us to find a property for them. That wouldn't have happened in the first year of trading, because the reputation wasn't there. You've got to work hard, and it, people sometimes think, oh, it must be easy having your own business. Yes, you can pick your hours, and that was one of the reasons why we did it, so that we can work around the children, so we can go to their school events, etc. But it isn't easy. It's sometimes, I used to say to my mum, I'm working from 9 till 5, but that was 9 o'clock in the night when the kids were in bed until 5 o'clock in the morning. It is a lot of hard work. And I think if you're prepared to do that hard work, and then you've just got to ride with it and don't give up, because as I say, the only time you fail is when you give up.
That's true. That's true. So the only time we fail in this life is when we give up. So we just have to
Yeah,
keep pushing on,
keep
keep
pushing on,
trying.
definitely.
Yeah,
Exactly. And
keep
if
trying.
one thing doesn't work, try another. And don't
Another.
be afraid to reach out as well, because it can be a lonely place as well. I think, when you're self-employed, or if you're running your own business, and you kind of, I was very of the mindset initially, oh, I don't want to bother such and such because they're busy. But everybody, join Facebook groups, networking events, and get the support you need. You know, you don't have to spend thousands. I mean, I must admit, I've invested quite heavily in myself for the various masterminds that I'm on, and they're pretty good. Well, they're very good. You know, they do help, and you come out of them and you're buzzing and you feel like you want to rule the world. But it's maintaining that level of enthusiasm, of you know, of wanting to get onto the next level and scale and move up the ladder, if you like. But as I say, just keep on going.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing.
Yeah, yeah. And from what you said, definitely surrounding ourselves with like-minded people so that can help us to grow, basically.
Yeah,
Thank you
exactly.
so much for coming on today. Thank you
no
so
problem.
much.
It's been lovely to chat to you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And until next time, goodbye, everybody. Please subscribe to our talk show if you haven't. And if you have, thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye. Take care.
Bye. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today on Mission to Inspire. Subscribe if you have not already done so. Like, comment, leave a message. Let's stay connected. Let's jointly inspire the world.